back to another episode of Debt Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business. I'm your host, Steel Archer, and it's a crowd favorite. It's Brent Nally here to talk to us today. I'm really excited to talk to Brent Nally because these are exciting times in the world, horrible times, but exciting. So everybody hang in there and survive so that you can reflect on this. I'm calling it the time of great reflection. All right, so before we cross over to Brent Nally, listen, we have to thank our sponsors. That's Thrivous. Remember, if you share this episode around, it goes from $5 to $160 worth of Thrivous. That's GM. Nootropics are the best on the internet. You can't get any better anywhere else. So check out Thrivous. Please do that. Also, thanks to I Am Transhuman, David Kelly over there doing a great job with the I Am Transhuman campaign. New posts coming out all the time over on the I Am Transhuman campaign. And also thanks to Transhumanist-Party and everybody else. All right, well, Brent Nally, welcome back to Debt Nation. It's really, really exciting to have you here. You know, we've had a lot of shows. We've done a lot of stuff. We've been through a lot of stuff. And, we're back. Firstly, let's just say, how are you? And how are you dealing? Are you in lockdown? What's happening over there in your part of the world? What is happening? It's crazy times.
First deal, thanks for having me. I just posted on my Facebook that we're live, so hopefully that brings in maybe a few more people. And I'm doing great. My family's doing very well. And it is definitely crazy times. I think everybody on this planet who's conscious is learning a little bit more about how reality actually works from a geopolitical standpoint. We're probably all getting a little crash course on viruses and pandemics and all sorts of things. It's been very interesting the last few weeks. And I am in Folsom, California, which is just about a half hour east of Sacramento, maybe 2 hours east of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I believe that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, just this morning announced a total, I don't know the exact phrase here, but lockdown for the entire state of California, where I think people are only supposed to be leaving their homes for essential reasons like healthcare and food. So, I try to be a law-abiding citizen as much as possible. My birthday was Monday, March 16th, and I spent a few hours going to Costco, trying to load up on some food for my family. We're big Costco shoppers and customers, and we already had plenty of food. And I always keep plenty of toilet paper and paper towels. So they were all out of paper towels and toilet papers by the time I got there, and all sorts of other things. But I was able to stock up on enough canned goods and some healthy enough foods to keep our family probably running for a couple months if it so happens that this, plays out for a couple months. But just final thing, Steele, I'm not personally worried. Hopefully we can get into the science and what I've learned about this. COVID-19 is dramatically affecting people with compromised immune systems, and it's an age-related diseases. It's primarily only killing old people, and then a very small percentage of people from age 10 to 49 who have compromised immune systems and other pre-existing health conditions.
Wow, yeah, I totally agree, and it's good to see that you have foresight with this. Being a Costco shopper by default makes you someone with foresight, but you're not only switched on in the Costco realm. You're switched on with the markets, you're switched on with the currency, you're switched on with the cryptos, you're switched on with human health, you're switched on in the fact that we're all getting older and that we need to find a cure for aging, that we need to find a cure for heart disease and cancers and all these other things. And obviously here at the Debt Nation, we're always talking about preventative policies and the fact that we need preventative policies to find healthcare solutions to a lot of the world's diseases. And that's a serious issue. And these viruses, this is not the last one. COVID-19 is not the last time we're going to have a pandemic. It frightens me to think about that. But with the current the build out of technology, it's not building it in the way that will support future shocks. And hopefully COVID-19 is a wake-up call to the world saying we need to prepare for future shocks, just like we build weather radars or satellite systems to track weather, or we built early warning systems to tell us when an earthquake is going to happen. We need to do the same in the biological space. And, this doesn't just mean viruses. This doesn't mean just pathogens or bacteria. This also means things like aging, heart disease, lung disease, cancers. We need to have a revolution in healthcare, a revolution in preventative policies globally. And, that's what we've been saying here. And, people are waking up to that. And I'm optimistic that on the other side of this, people will be thinking more about preventative policies. We've been living in a just-in-time world, whether that be supply chains, everything's just in time, or whether we've been living in just-in-time incomes. There's a lot of people out there who are going to struggle because they don't have any sort of savings, and now they're faced with homelessness because they live in a just-in-time income. Businesses live in a just-in-time way where they get an income, they pay out their stuff, they pay out their fees, and they don't have any sort of buffer for a rainy day. We live in a whole society of just-in-time, and I think that this COVID-19 will restructure society to be safer and stronger and more secure on the other side, and people will start to think about preventative policies. You can hear it across the world. Preventative policies are echoing across. It doesn't encourage me very much that people are running to toilet paper as their disaster relief mechanism. It doesn't make any sense. It's herd behavior. It's it's silly. That doesn't encourage me at all. But I understand that if the fiat currencies go to zero, toilet paper will be worth more than fiat currency. So maybe that's what they're thinking. But
that's literally happened many times in history. For those who don't know their history and don't know about fiat currencies, I mean, there's literally been times in Nazi Germany where people have had, literally, not exaggerating, entire wheelbarrows of cash, whether it be German francs or whatever, and they don't even burn well. Currency doesn't even burn as well as toilet paper or other things. So when it hyperinflates these currencies, they're pretty much worthless. They're not even good for toilet paper.
Yeah, well, they don't make that much physical currency anymore. It's all mainly digital currency, and so you can't even burn it anymore.
90%. Yeah, 92% of the world's fiat currencies are digital. And most of the global governments wanted 100%. They want to completely get rid of cash. And this COVID-19, governments have been saying, hey, get rid of it. It's a great way to spread the virus, which the conspiracy theories come out and they say, oh, they're pushing even more for digital. And it's like, well, the virus can spread on paper. So there's legitimate. I think what you might hear from me, Steele, during this is there is a lot of legitimate arguments on both sides of all, government, conspiracy. There's crazy times right now. So we just need to try and navigate this and focus on our prefrontal cortex, our logical brains, rather than, making decisions on our amygdala and our reptilian brain, which we don't make the best decisions when we do that.
Yeah, and do you are you optimistic that on the other side of this, the world will start thinking about preventative policies in a more fundamental way, especially along the lines of healthcare, vaccines, eliminating diseases, and these other things? Because if at the bare minimum, these are disrupted to the normal ebbs and flows of life, as we've seen, the whole globe has frozen over. And it's kind of like we've gone into an ice age, or a little ice age, and people are being disrupted left and right. Their lives are being disrupted, and it's because we don't have proper preventative policies. Do you think that this is a great awakening in preventative policies?
I do think it's a great awakening, and forget the future. It's already happened now in the last few months and weeks. People are already starting to wake up and learn more. I personally am in a situation where, my wife and I are not working traditional jobs. My son just turned 4 months young today. He was born November 20th. Today is March 20th. So we've been staying home primarily to work on entrepreneurial efforts and raise our son, be around him. And so I've had time, to really try and figure out what's really going on in the markets and with this virus. And so I've, been watching the show Pandemic on Netflix. My wife and I are going to watch Outbreak, the great movie from 1995, which I've seen many times, but I think when I watch it again, it will be a little different now that I've kind of like lived through this, that we're living through this. And there's another movie from 2011 with Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow, which I've seen, Contagion. I want to watch that again too. So the show on Pandemic on Netflix so far has been pretty good. It's kind of long. It's a television show. It's like 45 minutes each episode, but they make really good points. And Bill Gates's presentation at TED from 2015 is pretty eerie at this point, regardless of the conspiracy theories you think about Bill Gates. He did, many intelligent people have predicted a problem like this and predicted that the US and the globe would not be prepared, and we haven't. And so the silver lining for me is that COVID-19 is really not that bad of a virus, of a disease, compared relatively to other viruses, and also compared to other diseases of aging that are killing about 110,000 people every day. I misspoke, so I want to make sure everybody heard. 110,000 people die 110,000 people die every single day from aging or aging-related diseases. So what I'm working on is trying to get to the root cause of all that, instead of dumping more money into heart disease and cancer and osteoporosis and osteoarthritis and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. By that time, for a lot of these folks, it's just too late. That's why it's too hard to find cures. We need to go way earlier to the root cause. And COVID-19 is no different. It is a disease that is killing overwhelmingly, 99% or more. It's killing people of, advanced ages of, 50, 60, 70, 80 plus. And the very small percentage of people from age 10 to 49, it's 0.2% of those people are dying who contract the disease. They already have, very compromised immune systems. So the real key here is to reverse human aging and keep people biologically young. And then we won't have to worry as much about all these, problems that I mentioned.
Absolutely. And, if a lot of these people, these older folk that are getting hit by COVID-19 were younger, they wouldn't have a problem because they wouldn't have compromised immune systems by bacterial
Biologically
infection.
younger. Biologically younger. That's a key differentiation, not chronologically. Everybody's going to keep aging. We're not talking crazy talk here. We want to make sure the audience understands that this is real science. We're not going to reverse your age. You're born whatever day you were born. This is not a science fiction conversation we're having, but we can reverse people biologically. So that's what Steele was referring to. I apologize, Steele, for
that's a good distinction. Yeah, biological aging is your biological clock as opposed to your chronological clock. We're not Doctor Who. We're talking about Dr. Bill Andrews, not Doctor Who. But I totally understand that. But that's a good clarification on that. So it's about reversing biological aging and primarily with telomeres and telomerase. Shortening those, it seems to be a pathway, an express pathway to achieving that. And so, people like Sierra Sciences needs a lot more funding because that's the source of curing a lot more of these, curing or preventing a lot more of these diseases that attack people and their immune system simply can't cope. And one of the big things about COVID-19 is that the world is underprepared. Okay, it's this whole issue, this whole crisis is about the intensive care beds and the lack of them across the world. I mean, the fact that we don't have, when you're talking about the United Kingdom or something, and they have a population of 65 million, and they're talking about having 30, 40, 50 or less intensive care beds, or the United States with 360 million and having this extremely low number of intensive care beds. I mean, this is a world that's underprepared by a massive proportion. And, when I talk about misallocated capital here on this show, lots and lots of misallocated capital, we're talking about ICU beds, for example. Not only the research into curing aging and diseases and things like that, And and a lot of the construct. What's the point of doing a lot of this construction work, building stadiums, building roads, building this and that, building whatever they're doing, when you can't do it because of an outbreak? If there was more research labs into all this sort of anti-aging and anti-disease prevention, those people would go back to work. The United States Transhumanist-Party did an emergency briefing on what should be done, and they said, $100 billion should be injected immediately into building hospitals across the United States that are permanent. And, when the demand for patients goes down, the doctors and nurses and people within the building should be able to switch into research mode so that they can still service the population density of that geographic area in times of need. But also when that need drops, they go shift to the other side of the building and they do research. And so you have a dual capacity of hospitals and research units and research facilities in one, and that don't get removed when times are good, because they still service certain population factors. What do you think of that policy?
I mean, I generally think that it's a good policy. The problem is that's just very difficult to make such dramatic change in most places in the world, and certainly in the U.S. in this day and age. So, corporations are focused on short-term profits. And so when you're so focused on short-term profits and you're in such a maybe competitive environment, it's difficult to think such long-term. That's one of the things.
Well, the reason that that they've announced these measures is because the governments are launching fiscal stimulus like mad across the world. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on projects as we speak. So it's not a matter of will. It's a matter of what are the projects that the government's spending money on right now. They launched hundreds of billions of dollars worth of projects yesterday, the day before that, talking about up to $1 trillion spending bills. And so I think the political will is there to spend money. It's just, what are they spending it on? And I think a lot of these backlog of government projects, are coming out. But a lot of this is, again, misallocated capital. They're spending it on things that make sense when times are really good. And everything's functioning, the oil around the world is functioning and greasing the palms of trade. But, that doesn't really make sense when we need them, such as ICU beds or permanent hospital care. And also, and also on this corporation thing, I mean, the chairman said on healthcare, for example, these doctors, these nurses, as in this example that we're living in now, they would function as carers and they would be used for treating this pandemic. But again, they would switch and revert back to researchers under the government regime, and because healthcare is a non-negotiable. Healthcare should be, accessible and equitable for everyone, and that doesn't mean eliminating private institutions or private corporations from being involved in the supply chains or in building products for these hospitals. Or it doesn't even mean that that corporations wouldn't be allowed to function within the hospital regime itself. But it does mean that every American would have fair and equitable access to hospital care. What do you say?
I agree. I'm just saying, don't hold your breath that it's just going to happen. I'm just saying that I've just turned 35 on Monday, and after a while you start to see how the world really works, and you realize why there are log jams. But I'll say, hey, I'm an optimist. I try to be a realist and an optimist, some kind of combination of the two. And now's the time to do it. There's no better time right now to get the public support behind, $100 billion, $1 trillion, whatever, to build the infrastructure that we need, so that, as I mentioned before, when the next type of virus comes through that may not be as friendly as COVID-19 and just be going after let's be honest, they're going after the more weak people from a health standpoint. These are older, more frail people, or even the younger people who've died. They have pre-existing conditions. The flu doesn't really do that. The flu can kill anybody of any age. So just we become numb to even the flu in our society. The flu kills about 600,000 people every single season. Every year on average or so. Fact check me on that. I think it was 600,000 people from November to February of 2019 to 2020. The flu strain, of course, evolves. It mutates every year. That's why it's different. That's why it's so hard to create a vaccine that actually works for the flu. In that Netflix show Pandemic, they are profiling a specific team in San Francisco, and they also go down to Guadalajara, where their research facilities are too, where they're working on pigs to try and create a universal flu vaccine. So I'm only on episode 2 of that. I want to continue watching it, but my general point is that there's probably going to be another time in our lifetimes, if we live long enough, where another virus is going to come along that's way worse. And what we should all be learning right now is that we need to be way better prepared on so many different levels, not just hospitals, but our entire geopolitical, geoeconomic system needs to be set up way better, because we haven't even discussed the stock market. It's freaking out. And I've been listening to really intelligent, very successful investors, billionaires, people like Carl Icahn, Mark Cuban. I've watched their interviews. They're on CNBC, on YouTube the last few days. Jim Cramer, and the truth, Chamath Palihapitiya, who runs Social Capital. I really respect him, and many others, Kyle Bass. And the truth is that what I've learned is that as of right now, March 30th, nobody knows where this bottom is going to be, if it's going to be a V, or if it's going to be more of a U, a drawn out U, or if it's going to be a dead cat bounce. Nobody really knows. And so just trying to be an investor for my own personal family and manage my private wealth, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. But it's literally like the $1 million question.
Yeah, we live in uncertain times, especially in terms of these markets. And my projection on a geopolitical level is optimistic. It's 6 months. It's because this is a game that can be ridden out between China and the United States, and it's the oil markets with Russia. It's Putin and the Saudis. And it's Iran, and they're all being taken on at once, and this virus has accelerated that trajectory. But I do think that in, let's say, 6 months, China will be back up. The PMI index of China is starting to come up again. Chinese manufacturing is starting to come back online. It will be a historic slump. It's going to be a historic slump there in the United States as well, something on par with possibly the Great Depression. I hate to say it. It's going to be a big slump, but it's going to definitely change the psychology of how people think about the future and how people think about how the system is run and how it's been set up. And it's going to be very tough times, I think. But yes, where does it bottom? Where does the Nasdaq? Where does the S&P? Where does the Dow, where do they all bottom? And that is the real big question. My very first ever show was massive economic crash, and because we're on a bull run that was inflating on low interest rates, that was unsustainable. It was a hologram. It was all debt-filled hologram. I literally called this show Debt Nation, not for fun, but to warn people that debt was the biggest threat to longevity. Debt is the biggest threat to longevity at this point in time. It won't be forever, obviously, but this is the systemic crisis that underlies the longevity experience. And it depends really what those people in higher places want to do with that debt. I mean, do they want to roll it up to the IMF or the BIS? Do they want to instigate? What do they want to do with all these currencies? Do they want a new currency, a single global currency to is it Bitcoin? Is it a government-backed fiat coin? It doesn't make sense that I don't think it's kind of odd to think that all these other countries around the world would bow out their own currency and their own power to submit to a single currency, on a geopolitical level. Why would China, give up its ability to create a petro or yuan? Or why would the Russians bow over to an American imposed single currency unit? I can understand why the Europeans would bow out of the euro, because the euro, that was set up as a geopolitical maneuver to try and give Germany power inside of the European Union, so that they can shift their manufacturing problems, their export problems to those Mediterranean countries such as Greece, which has had horrible, and Spain, which has had horrible unemployment forever. So I can see the euro cracking in this world, but I don't see how you could ever make a single unit of currency that would be exchanged worldwide. I don't know. What do you think? Do we think we have a new world order coin, a new currency, a global fiat currency? Do you think that is something that's on the table?
It's certainly on the table. If you're asking how likely it is, in the near future, we'll call it the next 10 years, I wouldn't think that it's very likely, for a lot of the reasons that you just so eloquently laid out. Has to do with power and nation states like China and the U.S. not wanting to give up their power. And as soon as there were, talks of serious talks that start to occur, sure enough, you'd see every nation state vying to be, higher up in that totem pole. There's always, the devil's always in the details. Even if there is one currency, who gets the most of it? Where does it start from? These are questions, where as a crypto asset investor, looking at a lot of these coins, the devil's in the details with everything. So I'll just pretty much leave it at that, unless you want to go further on it.
Do you think that the general populace still trust the US dollar? Or do you think they still trust the system? Because obviously the dollar and all fiat currency is built on trust in the system, and it's when companies stop accepting payments in that currency, or the government starts to, it kills itself, it shoots itself in the foot because of tax receipts or whatever. Do you think that there's enough trust in this system that the US dollar will survive this, even if it is getting inflated away? I mean, it's lost 99% of its purchasing power. We're right on the end of its purchasing power, but it still is the world reserve currency, which puts it in a unique position. What do you think about? Do you think this is the death of the dollar, or do you think that the dollar could ride out for another 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, just to clarify what you said there, the Federal Reserve created, the Federal Reserve note, the U.S. dollar, in 1913, and here we are in 2020. And since then, I believe the statistics I've most recently looked at show a deflation of the dollar, of the purchasing power of the dollar, at about 98%. So that means, your $1 that you had in 1913 when it was created is worth about 2 cents now, so that shows you just what's happened over time. But relative to other fiat currencies is the key. The dollar has done really well compared to all the other horrible fiat currencies. The euro is only 20 something years old. I think it was created in like 1997 or something. Fact check me on that. And so that's what's happening, right? That's what's happening. 2000, somewhere around there. It's about 20 years old. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is about 23 years. So to answer your question, what's actually happening right now from the latest statistics that I've looked at is that while the dollar, the Federal Reserve is creating way, way, way more dollars, like crazy amounts, other fiat currencies are doing that as well. And so a lot of global investors are rushing into the dollar, and the dollar is actually doing better compared to pretty much every other fiat currency that I've looked at, including China, including the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar. So as of right now, even though we're all losing more money to inflation by holding dollars, we're losing less relative to the purchasing power of, the other fiat currencies. So, and it's hard to stay in any investment right now, including cryptocurrency, because those have all been going down recently in the last few weeks from this COVID-19 crisis. So it's really difficult to know where to put your money in. I've actually held personally a decent amount of money in cash, US dollars, and literally checking and saving accounts. And I felt pretty dumb doing that for, the past few years, missing out on a lot of this wild ride. But I had my, nest egg stashed away. And even there, banks could shut down, and that digital money that I stare at when I log in to Brent Nally on whatever account that I have, it could just be gone one day. So I'm aware of that too. So I wouldn't say anything's off the table when it comes to making predictions. One thing I've said is, I listen to all and I try and figure out what makes the most sense to me. I followed the Dollar Vigilante for many years, Jeff Berwick. Steele, I found out about your show and met you, maybe 6 months ago or so in 2019. And I've listened to a lot of these predictions about the dollar hyperinflating. And it's times like this where it starts to be a little bit more realistic. I don't think we're there yet, though, from what I've seen thus far. But I think this crisis has got people thinking. And I never like to say never. Anything's on the table. And if the US dollar did hyperinflate, holy shnikes, who knows what could happen there. I'd be screaming Bitcoin Cash, to everybody, say Russian there, but who knows, that could crash too.
I think it's like the Plaza Accords or back to Bretton Woods. I think it's a reverse. It would be a reverse of the Nixon gold standard idea. I think we would go back to gold. I mean, the reason that logo there is in gold, the detonation logo is in gold, is because gold and silver, but gold especially, has maintained its monetary value throughout millennia. The United States is not, this is the thing, the United States is not dead. It's not dying in the fact that it's still a superpower. It still can hold out there and do its great thing. Its underlying economy and its underlying geography and everything else is really, really strong. It's not that. It's the financial. It's the currency is broken. And Rome, with the denarii. I mean, we saw the depreciation of the Roman denarii throughout the whole history of Rome. I mean, first they had the coin, and then, to pay the soldiers, they would clip the coin and they would melt it down, and then they couldn't even do that anymore, and so they would give the soldiers land, and that was a big reforms with the land reforms. And I think, on this channel we talk to Ben Zion 2020 a lot, and his Futurist New Deal is a proposal for a federal land dividend, which is essentially what they did in Rome at that time, to give the Roman soldiers real assets and something real and tangible to hold on to, even though that the currency was deflating. But even through the currency crisis and the currency reset, and there was a few of them, Rome survived, and Rome ticked on, and Rome went on for 1,000 years, and it re-engineered itself. It became the Byzantine Empire, and it became multiple empires through a long stretch of time. And it survived on and on and on in fundamental ways. So I wouldn't be too. It's a hard transition. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to a bunch of people who sit around in a room. They decide what they're going to tether the new currency to, and that's gold. I'm going to call it now. That's gold. They're going to go back to gold. And then they work out the exchange rates with all the other different countries around the world. And, maybe the Germans go back to the Deutschmark, and the French go back to the franc, and the Italians go back to the lira, and the UK keeps with the pound sterling, and Australians keep with the Aussie dollar, and the Chinese stay with their yuan. But anyway, everybody resets, tethered off this new currency, which is now tied to a medium of exchange, and that a medium of value, and that value would be the gold standard. So it's just undoing Nixon's silly idea of decoupling the US dollar from the gold standard. But it's not his fault so much in the fact that 1913 was the bigger problem.
Right, and you're referring to 1971 there with Richard Nixon decoupling the U.S. dollar from gold. And, it's not that I'm ignorant of these ideas. I'm actually pretty well educated on them. I got some books back there, The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson, Harvard professor at the time. He wrote the book in 2010, now a Stanford professor. The Alchemy of Finance by George Soros. I got another great one, The Bitcoin Standard, which goes through the evolution of money as well as Ascent of Money does.
Great book.
I highly recommend I highly recommend the Ascent of Money documentary series, also by Niall Ferguson on YouTube. It's about 4 hours. And so the more you understand about the history of money and how these things came about and why gold has been money for at least 5,000 years and probably longer, and silver has been second money, are, hard economic laws and actual physical, laws. When I say physical, I mean physics, the way the properties of gold and how it works and how it doesn't degrade over time. So, I know all those things. I've studied Austrian economics. Maybe it was before we went live, Steele, you asked me where I sit. I'm more of an Austrian economist, but the reason why I'd strongly push back on your prediction there is that the people who run our global economy at pretty much every single one of the major fiat governments, they are not Austrian economists. They are Keynesians, and they're not even talking about a gold standard right now. And so I think we still have a long way to go before we see any type of a gold standard come back in. As much as I'd like to see it happen, I've actually investigated this pretty thoroughly on many different levels. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and Fort Knox in Kentucky is where gold reserves are supposedly there. And I've investigated this. I've watched, a few documentaries and researched, and the locals in Fort Knox, if you talk to them, they know that the gold hasn't really been there for many, many years. And I think it was U.S. Secretary Treasury Stephen Mnuchin maybe a year or two ago, 2018, 2019. He went to Fort Knox and went in and took a picture with some gold bars, I think, and said, "See, it's all here," expecting that to, be proof. But even if Fort Knox had all the gold that they say that they claim that they have in there, which they don't, but even if they did, it would still be the most ridiculously small percentage of the amount of fiat U.S. dollars that they've created over the last 107 years since the Federal Reserve came in 1913. So we're still so far decoupled from the gold standard, no matter which way you slice it, and we're just in detonation. Back to you, Steele.
Yeah, no, we are in detonation. I don't know though, because Trump sends out a lot of these signals, and he stands in gold elevators, and he has put gold curtains in the White House, and and all this sort of stuff. So Trump is signaling that he's a gold fan, and in his New York apartment, it's a golden apartment, right? He's got it draped in gold. So Trump has personal incentives to take us back to a gold standard, and if that's a signal. You're right. Paul Krugman, I don't like that guy. He's been wrong. He's a propaganda artist. He's one of these liberal elites.
I think he said in 1994 that the internet would
be as valuable as a fax machine,
a fax
or something.
Machine, right? Yeah.
This guy's a moron, and he runs your life. He runs your economy, and he doesn't like gold. And I agree with you, but this might be. I think the U.S. has about 8,000 tons worth of gold, and I agree with you. The Fort Knox idea, that it's all gone. I mean, there was photos there's been a lot of photos over time of trucks entering and leaving that, and how people determined how much gold has left is they took photos of the tires, and when the tires were the air pressure in the tires, they did an analysis on the air pressure of the tires when they went in, and when they came out, the air pressure had reduced slightly, which means they were full of something. And I know that there's been a great big gold war going on between the Germans, who have been wanting their gold out of New York for a long time. The Chinese have been trying to get the gold out for a long time of American built bullion holders on a national level. And I know that
2012, Germany asked for their gold back. They wanted it immediately. I remember I was working at Hewlett Packard at the time at a sales job, and I was already deep into this stuff, Austrian economics, and I was a mortgage broker in 2007, 2008. And essentially, I remember the U.S. basically said, we'll get it
No.
to you when we get it to you. And I was like, oh, that tells you everything you need to know right there.
Yeah.
Because for those, just real quick, this will be very brief, but for those who aren't aware, the Bretton Woods Agreement, after World War II, what all the nation states agreed upon is that, hey, the U.S. won World War II, and the U.S. will house all of the gold. The dollar will become the U.S. reserve's currency. We'll protect all the gold. And whenever you nation states want your gold back, just ask for it and we'll give it to you. And then, of course, that hasn't happened, because what I believe has happened is, corrupt entities within the U.S. government over many, many decades have sold off that gold to other foreign entities, or maybe they've raided it for themselves, if you believe in the fact that the Federal Reserve is actually a semi-private and public institution, but I think it's way more private than people realize. There are private shareholders of the Federal Reserve, and we don't know who they are. That's why we want to audit the Federal Reserve, and Bernie Sanders has said he would do that if he became president, but as of this moment, it looks like that's not going to happen because Biden is currently crushing him in the polls. But we all know not to always trust the polls from 2015, 2016 with Donald Trump. So stay tuned, planet, because who knows how this will all play out. But yeah, I don't think that the U.S. has much gold in Fort Knox and in the Federal Reserve banks like in New York and the other Federal Reserve local branches. I just don't believe it for many reasons that I've researched over the years.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on the same page, and that's why you're on the show, Brent Nally, because this could be it. They could have fractionally lended out that gold again. Or they could have the whole 8,000 tons, and if they've led other countries to believe that they've lent out all that gold, and they still do have all that gold, then they're going to win the gold war, because they have about 8,000 tons. India would be coming close in second or third, because they have a lot of wedding traditions. And in their wedding traditions, it's traditional to buy a lot of gold and give the bride a lot of gold. And there's a lot of people in India, and there's a lot of weddings going on in India. And Indian brides have a lot of gold if you aggregate that. So they have the central bank, which buys a lot of gold, but they also have a lot of their population that's loaded up with a lot of gold because of customs and traditions related to weddings. So India is going to be very strong if they do. And I don't know. I'm sticking with my prediction that they will have to go back to a gold standard. I think they won't have a choice. What's
your time frame here? Are we thinking like 6 months or like 12 years?
It depends. It depends on when the dollar is kaput. And this is the thing about these late stage currencies, is because it is the world reserve currency and we've never been in this situation before. This could stretch out for another 20 years if they want.
Right.
This could also, as they just diminish the purchasing power more and more and more, but that will cause inflation in everything. And I mean, that's why they're doing the fiscal stimulus, because the central banks, through this whole crisis since Obama bailed out the banks, all the central banks, every Fed committee I've been watching from here to China to America to the ECB, every committee meeting says the governments have to commit to fiscal stimulus. Again, it's the Chicago Keynesian idea of fiscal stimulus. And, we haven't had a new war apart from a war with ISIS, which is the broken window fallacy. So there hasn't been enough destructive nature in the world to push out those newly created dollars. So, and the population has not wanted to go to another war or anything like that. Arguably well, because people don't like wars. It's not fun, right? So, the central banks have been crying out loudly for this fiscal stimulus, and now it's happening. Now with this COVID-19, you're looking at governments all around the world launching that fiscal stimulus, and it's because they're looking to create inflation. Because central banks were looking to create inflation, which was QE1, QE2, QE3, QE4.
QE infinity, right?
Yeah, QE infinity. It's not creating inflation. Modern monetary theory always said that if you print more money, you're going to raise prices and therefore create the 2 to 3% inflation that they want. It wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So the central bank said we can't do anything more, and that's why you've seen interest rates at record lows for so long, even during the good times, because the governments were
negative
unwilling.
Interest rates now in Europe. We have negative interest rates. It's
Negative
crazy.
interest rates, which means the deposit holders are cooked. I mean, who wants to put their money in to a machine that just evaporates your money? So the deposit side is now, and you're a mortgage broker. You know this much better than I do in terms of the deposits and the lending infrastructure. And lenders, people don't want to take loans in that environment either. It's not an incentive for taking loans. I wouldn't want to take a loan into that environment. And as you know, the balance sheet is inflated massively on the central banking side. So it's kind of like the central banks have said, hey, we don't know where else to go. It's time for governments to step in and create more debt in order to inject fiscal stimulus into this economy to try and get that inflation target up. And that's been the game. And since this COVID-19 thing, you've seen a raft of emergency measures across the world, from China to here to there to everywhere, especially in the United States. Hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fiscal stimulus coming through the pipes in order to get that inflation up. Now, what does that mean? I don't know what the end game of that is. Again, it's mainly the currency. This could roll on for another 10 years, or it could be a global reset today. And the way Trump talks, if somebody said to him, Mr. President, do you want to reset the currency? He might have accidentally said, yes, we want to do it very, very quickly. Oh, no, okay. Whoops. We don't know with Trump sometimes. He does say things like that. Therefore, if you've got a current currency that's backed by the Pentagon, which is all it's backed on is faith and the Pentagon that the US dollar can print itself into infinity, where do you fall back to? And, I mean, it's the only place is gold.
Can I comment on that real quick, Steele, for some of the people who watch and who might not be aware? So, the dollar used to be backed by gold. So before 1971 and, even before 1913, when paper money started coming about around the 1600s or so, it was just a receipt that you wrote. That's what the paper was, to claim your gold. And so the dollar was backed by gold, and you could turn that in to get gold at any, treasury department in the U.S. Now, for those that don't know, the dollar is actually backed by, quote, the full faith and credit of the United States of America, end quote. So that's what Steele meant by the Pentagon. I mean, it's essentially the dollar is, spread by debt and death. We go around creating war and creating more debt for other economies to make America more and more powerful. And so that's essentially how the game works for those who don't know. I mean, I always want to make sure that we explain the game in the most, simple ways for those who don't understand it, because it doesn't matter how old you are. If this was never taught to you, how would you know? Because they're not going to tell you what I just said on mainstream media.
No,
that's
no.
How it actually works,
and I always say to people, do your own research. But at this late stage in the game, it's you should really be on top of this sort of stuff. And Brent Nally is doing great work. But anyway, look, this is a very interesting time. Cryptos, obviously. Let's quickly talk about cryptos. Cryptos are tanking. What's your analysis on that, Brent Nally? Why are cryptos tanking? This sounds unusual. You would think this might be a safe haven in these times.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of a long answer, so I'll try and make it as quick as possible. It's been theory. Bitcoin was created in 2008 in a white paper on October 31st, 2008. It went live January 3rd, 2009 by this pseudo-anonymous character, Satoshi Nakamoto. And it's been theory that in the next economic downturn, whether that's a recession or depression or global pandemic, whatever, that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies would be the safe haven to run to because of their economic properties and because of their cryptographic hashing, how it's basically impenetrable to hack into. So What is actually playing out right now, which is unfortunate to me as a Bitcoin Cash holder, and I still have Bitcoin, and is that unfortunately it's been tanking, like as hard or harder as the normal markets. I think it was maybe 6 days ago or so, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash were down like 50% within hours, within one day. And so that's been pretty crushing because it's really showing. I try to focus on reality, not how I want reality to be, but how reality actually is. And sometimes reality can give you a swift kick to the nether regions. And so what's actually happening so far is that people are treating their cryptocurrency as an investment. And so they're going to sell that first to make sure they go back into their fiat currencies so that they can pay their rent and that they can pay their mortgage. And that's kind of where my mortgage background comes in. Really what people actually do and what they should do is they should make sure first and foremost they still have a place to live. Everything else goes out the window. You stop paying the credit card, you stop paying the car payment, you stop paying your student loan debt, you sell all your other assets like cryptocurrencies, stocks, whatever, to make sure that you can still have a roof over your head to sleep. And I think that's basically what's going on. However, this could still play out over many days, weeks, months, and years. So we'll see. Cryptocurrency is not dead. I haven't sold any of my position. I probably should have bought some yesterday because it skyrocketed like 25% yesterday. Who knows? So we'll see. That's basically what's happening. And it's been a little unfortunate, in my opinion, about cryptocurrency not being a safe haven where people are rushing into in a time where there's uncertainty in governments and fiat currencies. However, that's not happening right now, and I could elaborate on why I think that is, but that's what's happening.
Do you want to elaborate on why you think that is? Because I'm going to give you my explanation.
Okay, just real briefly, and then I'll hear yours, because I already kind of said quite a bit. I think that people just don't get it. They don't understand what cryptocurrency really is. I'll just plug my cryptocurrency vlog series I did in 2017. I did, I think, 17 episodes. The total is about 4 hours. Maybe I'll link in the comments afterwards my playlist that you can watch. And you might say 2017, that was over 2 years ago, Brent. A lot has changed since then. Well, I laid out the fundamentals. I did talk a little bit about the, current news and cryptocurrency because a lot of my audience wanted to know what's going on today and tomorrow, what's going to happen next. But I was focusing on laying out the long-term fundamentals of what is money, what is cryptocurrency, why do I believe this is going to be the future of money. And so you could still watch that and learn quite a bit. However, sadly, still most people just don't educate themselves on how reality actually works. And I think that cryptocurrency has been seen more by the masses as a get-rich-quick scheme. When really if it's going to succeed, it's going to turn out to be a get-rich-slow scheme over like your entire life, where Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or whatever the cryptocurrencies that are most successful just suck in all the other bad money if they really are the hardest money, if they really are the best money. And we'll just see if that actually plays out that way. I'm holding on to my Bitcoin Cash right now because I think it's great money, especially in times like this because it's digital. You're only on your own phone sending it or from your computer. You're not even in a public place, or if you are, you're still just touching your own phone. You don't even have to touch a kiosk, like you do with credit cards sometimes, but punching things. You don't have to transmit dirty cash. So it actually is better money in that reason in a pandemic right now as well. It's better money in like every single way. There's just a learning curve to cryptocurrency as well too, because if you send it to the wrong address or something, your money's gone. And so there's a learning curve, and a lot of people can't handle that learning curve. I think that should really be understood and appreciated on why it's maybe not getting better adoption.
Wow, yeah, that's some really interesting points. And food, shelter, and water become really precedent at these sorts of times, in history. And I think people are, my explanation is there's a couple of different ones. I still think Bitcoin can go to 100,000 or maybe 1 million. I think the potential is there. I don't think that people will understand why it'll go to 100,000 or 1 million. I mean, these subjective values, but they're within the bounds of reality in the crypto space because it will absorb all the bad cryptocurrencies and be the top. I think I think Bitcoin itself is the top dog in the crypto space. No offense to Roger Ver, love Roger Ver. I'll have you on the show soon, sir, and you can convince me why not. But I think Bitcoin is that idea. But going back to Donald Trump and the central banks are opposed to crypto. They don't like crypto. It's decentralized money. And so they're doing everything they can to destroy it. And I remember Donald Trump versus Bitcoin. Donald Trump, and this is a Guardian article, says Donald Trump has criticized Bitcoin, Facebook's Libra digital coin, and other cryptocurrencies, and demanded that companies seek a banking charter to make themselves subject to U.S. and global regulations if they wanted to become a bank. I am not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are not money and whose value is highly volatile and based on thin air, Trump wrote on Twitter. The Facebook and other companies want to become a bank, they must seek a new banking charter and become subject to all banking regulations, just like other banks and national and international, he said. And I think
I remember him stating that. Yeah, that was pretty big news in the crypto space.
Absolutely, and that's you're talking about the Federal Reserve here with a lot of tools and a lot of money to attack Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space, and also the fact you're right about the pandemic thing where it's digital, so it won't enhance. But I think the governments want their own centralized fiat currency coin or something along those lines, similar to what they've been giving people today. I mean, slowly we're moving. You log onto your bank account and your bank account is there in digits and numbers on a screen. People don't really think of that as a coin. They just think of that as their bank account, which they can access from home. But that's pretty much what that is.
I think in other words, Steele, what a lot of people don't realize is that most of the world's money is already digital,
Yeah.
So whether it's backed by cryptography or whatever, most of the world's money is digital, and clearly we're going further in that direction to where eventually cash will almost certainly be gone because all the global governments want it and they have long-term plans to make it that way.
Yeah, and there are some governments like Austria which want to protect cash, and they argue that cash is important because it protects the most vulnerable people in society. But then there's small businesses that won't accept cash anymore in Sweden and in other places that will just not accept cash anymore. So this is a big point in the world, but the long-term outlook of cryptocurrencies is positive. This is a wild ride, and remember, it's made these huge gains in a very short time, and it's retrenching. It's going back to a value that reflects a pandemic-sized global response. Obviously, it's not a safe haven that we thought that it might be, but that's okay. That's okay because this is a long.
Well, not yet. It hasn't proven yet. Things can change fast. That's one of the lessons.
I think the rise of the ICOs. I think ICOs did a lot of damage to the cryptocurrency space, when that happened in 2016, 2017, because, you and I both know the fundamentals of Bitcoin back to 2011. You mentioned Mr. Nakamoto, the Japanese person who wrote the paper. When you read the paper, you realize the fundamentals of how it's supposed to work. And you work through this.
Well, Steele, just to be clear, Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonymous character. Nobody except
he could be a group of people. He could be that person. He could be that weird Australian guy who thinks he's him.
It's almost certainly not Craig Wright, but they chose whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is. They chose a Japanese name, I think, for very specific reasons, because the Japanese people are more adaptive to newer technologies and cryptocurrencies, and the Japanese economy, that's
it's a highly digitalized economy. It's a highly integrated, modern 21st century economy with a lot of digital infrastructure already embedded within the culture and within the people and within their banking system and all of their systems. Exactly. But you read that paper, and that paper is based on the fundamentals of Bitcoin. And I think everything was going okay until the rise of the ICO. And then the ICOs really ripped a lot of people left and right who all piled in without understanding much about the fundamentals of what money is, what the problems of fiat currency are, and stuff. And I think this shattered a lot of confidence in some. And there was a lot of other cryptocurrencies. Not just Bitcoin, but a lot of different coins, Dogecoin or something. Not the Dogecoin is not a bad coin, but if you're not sure about this world, a lot of people just piled into anything. And when
it's generally good advice to not invest in things that you don't understand.
Yeah, and a lot of people did. And I think we're seeing a reflection of that now, where a lot of people are saying, well, I didn't go too well in 2016, 2017. I saw Bitcoin take off, but I can't buy toilet paper with Bitcoin. What if I can't buy toilet paper? What use is it to me? And I think that is reflected in the price action on the negative side now. But the long-term outlook of Bitcoin, I still think you're looking at 100,000 or 1 million. I think it's subjective. And
when we could even get to a world where we're not even measuring in Bitcoin and US dollars, right? And like most people haven't even thought that far off. If the US dollar hyperinflates, then even if Bitcoin, doesn't gain any value, it will be worth $1 trillion because dollars will be worth nothing. So it's, who knows what will play out. But I think I know what you mean, but I just wanted to pose an interesting, mental exercise that maybe people hadn't thought of.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. You got a great mind, Brent Nally, and I'm really grateful for you coming on. I still hold, and I will continue to hold, that gold is money, because I think that I like the crypto space, but I think that governments want to tether themselves with something that is proven throughout time and that people understand and that is physical. And I think eventually it'll all go back to gold. I'm not sure on the time frame of that. Like you said, everything's up everything's up in the air now. But yeah, Brent Nally, is there anything else you wanted to say? I want to thank you so much for coming on. This has been a fantastic chat. And thanks for explaining and spelling some of this stuff out, because I rant on as if people have pre-learned knowledge on these things and don't really explain it. But you do an excellent job of breaking everything down into simple language and just spelling out exactly what people should really understand about some of these issues.
Well, Steele, I would just say first, thanks for having me back on Detonation. It's always fun to come on and share my thoughts with you and vice versa. And about the last month or so, I haven't been uploading as much content on my personal YouTube channel, but I have been busy behind the scenes with a new partnership of some other YouTubers. We've created a new YouTube channel that we'll start uploading videos to soon. It's called Max Life Extension. And we've already interviewed 10 longevity enthusiasts that many people will be familiar with. And the folks doing this are myself, Bobby Ridge, who runs his own YouTube channel, as well Life Extension Research. He's been on Detonation. Alex Kotoff, who runs Transhumania YouTube channel, also been on Detonation. And then Rowan Horn, who runs the YouTube channel Eternal Life Fans. So I've been working with those guys, and then another gentleman, Max, who's more in the background with the SEO wizardry, making sure that we titillate all the YouTube algorithms perfectly, this time around, because that's so important these days with being a YouTuber. So, we have a little team assembled, and so I'm excited, to partner with Detonation, and we can do some cross promotion. And I hope you guys can check out some of these interviews once we get them all on YouTube. So that's what I've been busy doing the last month or so.
I've been talking about Rowan Horn a lot on this show because, one of his logos is, or one of his messages that he carries around is, your health is your wealth. And, we can talk about gold or silver or this or that or this or that, but really, your health is your wealth. The two big currencies in the world, that's your health, your happiness, or the couple of big currencies, but your health, your happiness, and your relationships, and information. Okay, and this is why I set this show up, so we can have an information stream, because information that currency is going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. That stock is rising all the time. So so it's really encouraging to hear that you're getting on board with those guys and you're collaborating there. That's the sort of conversations that we really need in this point in history, this point in time. We need to keep focused on this and also on all the other issues of space and the environment and everything else that we talk about here as well. And really excited to collaborate with you guys on this, because we're all in this together and we all want the same outcome of a peaceful, happy, more prosperous life for everyone. And we talk about geopolitics and all that, but this is important so you can navigate through the world that's coming, and we can all come out on this on the other side so that we can work towards the goals of having peaceful, prosperous, healthy, happy lives for us, our future, our wives, our children, our families, our grandparents, in humanity as a collective. So, really good work there, Brent Nally. You keep up. You're a soldier, a gentleman, and a scholar as well. And we absolutely send our hearts out to you in these troubled times.
Thank you, Steele. Can I actually plug 2 more things just real briefly before we go?
Do whatever you want.
Okay, cool. So also, I've been working really hard the last 6 months or so with Vladimir Trofanov, my co-founder at Lev Sciences. So if you guys check, I'll put a comment in this YouTube channel with all of these links of this information. So LEV stands for Longevity Escape Velocity. And we are not trying to step on anybody else's feet. We're actually trying to build things that do not exist right now. So we've partnered with Lifespan.io. I've been having some conversations with Keith Kometo, who's the founder of Lifespan.io, and hope to interview him soon, whether it's through Max Life Extension or on my own YouTube channel. And so we've had meetings with Bill Andrews, Liz Parrish. We're trying to put together a huge private meeting with Aubrey de Grey, Bill, Liz Parrish, Bill Falloon, Greg Fay. We're trying to get all these people, but COVID-19 has really screwed us up. And so we're trying to get them to all share their research on our platform. And it doesn't have to be our platform. I'm just trying to do this because what I've realized from interviewing all these longevity thought leaders over the last year is that there's not one source where you can find all this. Like PubMed's great. There's other good resources, but to just go and see updated research as it's happening. And we're also trying to build more of a social network. So go to Lev Sciences, create a profile. It's completely free. Give us suggestions. We'll build on new features. Vladimir has a team of about 30 people that build websites so they can very nimbly take feedback and add on new features. And so I've been working really hard on Lev Sciences. I think it's just in the beginning. So I wanted to plug that. And then also, I did a YouTube video a few months ago with Vladimir on Lev Sciences. If you guys want to learn more about that, it's about 30 minutes or so. It's a demo. But then also, I've been wanting to do more writing about longevity and kind of what I've learned from all my years of researching, but also the last year interviewing so many longevity thought leaders and going to conferences like RadFest and Longevity Therapeutics and networking. And so Denora Delphin came to me about a month ago. She's the founder of the Immortalist magazine, and we've become friends on Facebook. And so I've written an article for the 3rd issue of the Immortalist magazine, and I hope you guys can check that out. I think it's about a 10-minute read. It's about 2,400 words, and I really try and explain as succinctly as I can what the problems are in anti-aging, why we haven't cured aging yet, why it's difficult, my ideas on what we can do to work together. And I even have a little paragraph in there that I was frantically updating last night for the final version, throwing in the final statistics of COVID-19 and how we should be using this crisis to tell people, explain that this is a disease of aging, and that if we actually put funding into aging research, then we might not have to deal with any of these viruses that are age-related. The flu is a little different because that affects even younger people, but I'm confident we can create a vaccine, a universal vaccine for destroying the flu eventually and destroy all diseases. The goal is destroy all diseases, including aging. Aging is clearly a disease, in my opinion. That way we can live hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And who knows what we can create. You could have 20 different, careers throughout this lifespan, 1,000 different careers. You could host YouTube channels and podcasts for 100 years, then switch and be a whatever, so it's just, those are the things that I'm interested in, and I hope people can check those things out.
Thank you so much for that. All right, we'll have to do a show on each and every one of those topics as well, because like this is absolutely great. And in this day and age, physical conferences are fading out a little bit, but we can. I hope you can do a virtual conference at least with all of these great players. Fantastic. And keep us in mind, and you know where to find us. And you're doing a great job, and you just continue to do a great job. This is really fantastic news. And I agree. Yeah, Donora Delphine, I'm going to have her on the show soon. She's sometimes she's hard to get a hold of because she's very busy with the Immortalness magazine. But I've been reading that magazine a lot, and it's fantastic. It's jam-packed with information, and I want to work closer with Donora Delphine on that as well. Just like Tafts is doing a great job there as well with their magazines and stuff. So this is a growing effort. This is a growing effort, the anti-aging effort and the anti-disease effort. It's growing and it's becoming more sophisticated, and I'm really excited to see that because there's a lot of work. We're trying to put death out of business, right? That's not easy, and we all have our own roles to play, and we all have our own jobs to do. But we can achieve this, and we can pull through this, and it's nice to hear that you're putting a positive spin on this crisis in terms of let's take the crisis and look at the fact that this is a problem with aging, as opposed to it's just a problem with a virus. No, it's not. The virus is generic. And aging is the real big one. We can cure a lot of things with aging. It's like throwing a big nuke at death. It won't kill it completely. It delay it a lot until we can work out another solution. So thank you very much, Brent Nally, coming in there from the USA. All the best to you and your family. It sounds like you guys are done the right stuff. Just stay safe, and I'm sure you know how to achieve that. You're a very competent person. So stay safe, and we will stay connected, and let's keep growing through this, and let's have a positive outcome on the other side. What do you say?
Yeah, definitely. Great message, Steele. It's always great to be with you. I really appreciate your time. And everybody, keep a positive outcome or outlook, and you'll have a better chance of having a positive outcome. Make sure you're getting plenty of sleep. Do things that to boost your immune system. Stay positive. Make sure that you're following the right people. Be careful who you follow, especially in these times. There's some people who just unfollow of certain things they've said about COVID-19. People need to really make sure they stay science-based, focus on the facts, regardless of what governments are deciding to do. Focus on the facts and what actually is playing it out, because you don't really want to be on the wrong side of this once all the facts really do come out in the years and months and years to come.
Yeah, and something you said really struck a chord with me in a few shows, since we met, but a few shows ago, and really take care of your mind and what you ingest. This is a really important part of the whole story, because if you're ingesting bad food and bad material into your mind, you're going to get a bad output. And, this is definitely not the time for that, especially when fear goes up and uncertainty goes up. If you're ingesting bad things, you might inflict bad things on other people. You might you might send silly messages around social media that aren't real, and you might be contributing to the dislocation and disorientation of yourself, your family, and society in a broad sense. So, if you wanted to hear some of the people that Brent mentioned all the way through this, all the different names, log on to some of those people and start ingesting some good, solid, intellectual food. Brent Nally, you've been great. You've been awesome, as always. Thank you so much for coming on Detonation. Thanks to Gennady Stolyarev, Chairman, for keeping this show on life support. You're doing a great job, sir. Thanks to Future Humanity Product. The future is in your hands. Thanks to thanks to David Shoemaker and superfan Mike DeVerde, as always, and a whole host of other people. I left my phone on the other side of the room. I haven't got my list with me, but the small donations really help. The small, especially if you're in the United States, if you give a small donation, my currency has crashed, so it's almost like double your money. And I can create a business out of this, and we can support each other even better. in the future. And then when the times roar back, we'll have the biggest longevity movement in the world, I think. This will be really fantastic. So all of your support through this horrible time in human history is really valuable. So thank you, everybody, for your small contributions to keep this show on the road. And the best currency of all, information, which is rising through the roof. Thank you so much. All right, Brent Nally, that's it. Detonation. Well, we're busy putting death out of business.